Wait, 2 seconds. How are you? And at that point, I just couldn't talk. I just couldn't say anything out loud. Um, Asking that question was really, really powerful. And it really shook me. And I think it was actually from that day, everything just got better. I think it's me. Cool. I think it's only really like the last 12 months, 18 months that I've really been aware of my own mental health. I've always, I'm slightly older, I'm like 43. It's not always been a thing to talk about your mental health. I never thought that I had irregular or poor mental health. I just felt, that I was just moody all the time, right? And it wasn't until I started crying in front of my GP for something completely, off the cuff. It wasn't anything important at all. And he kind of said to me, "Oh, does this happen quite a lot?" And obviously we went off and talking, but yeah, I think it's a bit like boiling the frog, right? Where you don't know you've got, mental health challenges or concerns or whatever, until something actually happens, until like it really, like precipice, And I think now, and this is like the first time I've really said this out loud. I've got obviously a very close group of friends, very small amount that I've spoken out loud about this, and I wanted to use this time to say stuff out loud to kind of help people, specifically men. But yeah, I have been diagnosed with depression, and I take antidepressants. I take sertraline, and I think when I first started taking sertraline like 12 months ago, I was very much, I don't want to tell anybody, it was a weakness, blah, blah, blah. And I think now I've come to terms with it a bit more. And I think it's okay to medicate to have better mental health, because it's something that needs to be addressed. Like I said, years ago, no one ever spoke about it. And now it's actually becoming more prominent. We all know we need to have better mental health. So yeah, my current state is that I'm okay. I have up days and down days, just like anybody. But I do medicate my depression with sertraline. I think I've had depression, or I had depression for years and didn't really know it. Like I said about that born in the frog, I think it just, over the course of like 10 to 15 years, it just kind of built up and built up. And then I just kind of burst. And I think that's down to, being a man, being slightly older and not talking out loud about it, which is what really helps now, right? But there was a turning point 18 months ago, but and again, I didn't realise, when I reflect, like you said, I look back and go, oh, actually, gosh, I was in a really bad way. If I compare myself to what I am now, if my wife compares me to what I am now, I'm a completely different person. I'm playing with the kids on the floor, and I'm not crying at a drop of a hat, and I'm not angry at the stupidest of things. And sometimes that still happens, but I've become way more aware now. I think there was a specific event, right, where I was super aware, where that was a turning point. From that point, it got worse before it got better. But the main point was, becoming really self-aware, understanding what was happening, stopping, thinking and going, this is the depression talking, for want of a better phrase, I had obviously worked for businesses, just like everybody else. And I always felt that I was very kind of entrepreneurial, right? So I started my own business. I started a digital agency. And at the time it was just me. And then kind of over like 7 or 8 years, I grew it to at its peak, like 6 or 7. And we're doing some really great stuff, right? And I think what had happened over that time, we had COVID. I got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. I had my first child. I moved offices a number of times, furlough. The business struggled. There was like work just dropped off because of COVID. I had invested a lot of time and money in a friend to join the business as well, and they kind of let me down, and in such a sharp, unexplained way, that I think over the course of those 7 or 8 years, it got to such a point where I absolutely exploded. And Yeah, we'd even lost footage, like 20 grand's worth of footage, working in the agency, and staff were tough. There was, well, I think, like I said, it was an amalgamation. It was like a compound of all of this stuff that had happened over the 8 years, and no one really to talk to about it. I obviously did have people to talk to about it, but I felt I couldn't talk to, or I didn't want to talk to them about it, right? I couldn't come home and tell the bad things that are happening, like invoices not getting paid or people not meeting payroll and stuff like that, to my wife, because she would worry. You have to kind of put on the Gary show, is what I would call it. And I'm jumping around, I'm being the Gary that everybody sees and thinks about, but actually that now I've come to terms is that was a facade, right? I totally was like not doing very well at all. I didn't know I was not doing well until I started to reflect on it. But anyway, there was this time where I came home, and it was a Friday, right? Nothing particularly happened that day, and I came through the door, sat down on the sofa, and I just started crying. I was literally bawling my eyes out for no reason at all, right? I just absolutely broke down, and I couldn't stop. And luckily, my wife was there. I kind of like lay down in bed, and I just couldn't move. It just felt like I weighed like 30 stone. I just couldn't pick my arms up, and solidly for 48 hours, I was in an absolute state. And I think, like, obviously people will experience kind of breakdowns or poor mental health in different ways, but at that point, it felt like the classic shit where we're at a precipice here, like something's happened. And it was almost like when it was happening, this highlight reel over the past 8 years was kind of like flashing through my head of all of the stuff that had amalgamated together, and to have this breakdown. And then what had happened after the 2 days that I was in bed, I then had to go back to work. Right? I just had to put on the Gary show for everybody on the Monday, and it was only at the time my wife knew. And I was just sitting there at my desk going, like, what am I doing to myself? What should I do here? And I kind of like, obviously now I was speaking out loud about it all with my wife. So there was someone there that I could talk to about it, and every day she was asking, hey, you okay? What should we do? You should talk to your GP. And it was at that point then I spoke to my GP. It actually probably was about 3 or 4 months after that, right? Where I then spoke to the GP, and it was a really simple thing. I think it was actually to do with type 2 diabetes. And for some reason I just, again, started crying over something really little. And he's like, oh, does this happen often? And then obviously I started crying even more. And it was at that point then, it gave me the excuse to say out loud. I didn't want to proactively say it. I didn't want to give in and say it out loud that I was feeling depressed. And it was at that point, he really noticed it really quickly. So he then suggested, hey, look, why don't we try sertraline? You can also sign yourself into therapy. And I was like, okay, this is it, right? I'm gonna take control, because it was just getting worse, and it was a detriment to the business, it was a detriment to my family, and obviously a huge detriment to myself and my friends. The great experience I had was the GP, and then the sertraline obviously got worse over the first 4 weeks. That's what happens. And it was really tough that first month, goodness me. But then I started, I didn't even feel like I was, when I asked him, well, what is this going to make me feel like? He's like, well, you're not going to feel like euphoric. You're just going to feel like your usual self. And in all fairness, I felt like my usual self. But when the sertraline started working, I was like, I absolutely feel like a new person. Like I absolutely was the person I was 10 years ago, or the person that my wife had married, right? So then I thought, okay, cool, we're on a roll here, we're doing well, I'm gonna do the therapy thing. And I had the worst experience, like trying to get, it's free therapy through the NHS, but the people just were like, couldn't be asked, they didn't want to book me in. I had to fill in, gosh, like a 12-page form. I just wanted to talk to someone about my mental health. I didn't want to have to, go for a full psychoanalysis PDF. And it was a really poor way. So I actually didn't do it. And I think I worry, because there are people out there, right, that do have poor mental health, do take that step, and it's such a tough step. Do take that step to go to have therapy, and then they get this roadblock, and then they just stop, and then they just kind of drop back in again, there wasn't a lot of support, quote unquote, prior to me reaching out to a few people. Only because I don't think, there's a bit of this kind of like man up kind of thing, couple of concrete pills to not talk about it. I was always an emotive person anyway, and that might have been a depression, like who knows. But, there wasn't a lot of support around me up until having the actual breakdown and then me saying it out loud. Once I did then say to people, everyone was very supportive and around me. But I would have liked, and no, do you know what the issue was? Is that obviously I work for myself as well. So, working for Reflect, there's obviously a massive initiative around mental health first aiders and Wellbeing Wednesdays, and I think that might have helped if I had that in place in the place of work. That might have supported taking that first step. I would have liked more support, but that's the reason for kind of doing this, like for talking out loud, is to encourage other people to kind of go through that process of actually asking, are you okay? And then asking a second time, So yeah, I think more people should ask the question, even if you don't think there's anything wrong. Like there was this one time, gosh, it was actually a day or two before I sat all my staff down and kind of made them all redundant, because what I did was I put a bunch of stuff in place to help better my mental health. I came out of the mist from all this search stuff, and I closed the business. Right, I had to shut the business because that was the main culprit right there and then. That was an easy win for just to kind of get that. It wasn't easy at all. Like it was awful. I remember the day of making everybody redundant. But the day before, I rang up a very close acquaintance who was a marketing recruitment consultant, and we'd done some work for him, and I rang him up and I was like, hey look, I'm about to close the business. Hold on. I'm about to close the business, and I need some help with recruitment. I might need a job. And he said to me, wait 2 seconds. How are you? And at that point, I just couldn't talk. I just couldn't say anything out loud. Asking that question was really, really powerful. And it really shook me. And I think it was actually from that day, everything just got better. Goodness me. I mean, this has happened. I'm in a much better place now. And I'm really open to doing everything I can, and I want other people to be open to doing everything they can too. And what I like about working at Reflect, or like progressive companies that do focus on mental health for their staff, is that there are so many options, right? There are so many people to talk to. We have a whole team of people, I think 10 people that are mental health first aiders, as well as like specific times we can go and talk to people, if those people aren't around. And then taking private healthcare as a benefit from the business, that's great, because now I can actually go and speak to somebody. I feel I will have a better experience because I love the NHS. My wife works for the NHS, so I'm pro NHS, but that experience I had, I think, is overlooked. I think physical first aid is always like the OG way of looking at things, and that it's only now over the last 5 years mental health first aid is starting to come through businesses and organisations now. So I'm way more open to addressing all of this kind of stuff like professionally, rather than just kind of talking about it by myself. November 22, when I had the breakdown, and those first 6 months, it was about being self-aware, and then the next 6 months was about implementing change, and then the last 6 months has been about maintaining that change. I think, but being able to speak out loud, absolutely, I wish I'd done that sooner. I think the separation between work and personal life really needs to happen, and it's not anything that I could have changed. I would hope the world would change alongside this awareness week and month and stuff, to have your friends be more aware, or just generally people around you more aware, because it just takes that one question, are you okay? And it can really just break open everything to, so it can be addressed, because I wouldn't wish it on anybody.
And are you okay?
Yes, I am okay now. I have peaks and troughs. I was in a real bad state. I had quite heavy alcohol and drug abuse whilst I was at the low points. But now I'm like the best version of me so far. It can only get better, right? I'd like to think, just like trying to come off metformin for type 2 diabetes, I'd like to try and come off sertraline, but I don't think I'm ready yet. I'm happy being happy. So it's, yeah, I'm in a really good space. Obviously there are upsetting things I'll talk about, you know, but it's good to say stuff out loud. It's okay to cry. Don't worry about it. Although I say it's okay, you know, say it out loud. I think from an advice perspective, you don't need to do it right now. You know, don't feel like you need to run out and speak to somebody. Don't feel like you need to get your shit together, because no one really has their shit together, right? I think it's more awareness, you know, taking that first step. It doesn't matter when you take that first step, you just need to take that first step. So becoming self-aware, it's like stopping yourself and going, oh, okay, this is happening to me. Because there probably isn't going to be many people around you that, you know, well, hopefully there might be, but 9 times out of 10, other people aren't going to approach you and go, are you okay? Do you need support? It will get better over the years, but I think that my key bit of advice is just about being aware. And then once you become aware, say it out loud. Me talking about my irregular mental health, I've come, like I said, I'm in a good space and I've come to terms with it. And I want to reduce the stigma around medicating for depression. Like I said, none of my family or my friends know or knew. And I did speak to someone on LinkedIn because they posted a packet of sertraline to say, hey, I want to reduce the stigma. And I was like, I messaged that person. I was like, at the time, I was like, I'm not ready to talk about it, but one day I will. And now I'm kind of, you know, 18 months away from the precipice of it all, the actual mental health breakdown. I feel like this is a good time, you know, and Mental Health Awareness Month and week, and we can kind of use this mechanic to try and really increase the, you know, the reach of it all, to try and, you know, make a change, make a difference.